Hi, good morning. It is Monday, the 17th of October, and it is 0934. Um, I've been thinking about this video for quite some time and haven't really done it because what I'm going to bring up is perhaps disturbing to some people. And in a way it disturbs me that I am bringing this up, but my mother raised me as a realist, and I look at at what things actually are and not what I would hope them to be or want them to be, but the actual situation where we find ourselves, and I use that as a broad term as an American, because we find ourselves in a very dire situation. And I want to give just a brief amount of history here. When the folks who began settling this nation made the 4,000 mile trip across the pond, if you will, the Atlantic Ocean, which, by the way, was no simple feat in and of itself in those days. They didn't have steel ships. They didn't have steam or gas powered propulsion like we do today. They literally sailed according to the wind, and I can tell you from experience that the Atlantic is a very dangerous ocean. It's extremely rough most of the year. I've crossed the Atlantic several times in one of those steel ships, even with the propulsion and everything that we had. It was extremely rough at times. So in a wooden ship with canvas sails, little food, little water, packed ships, it was extremely dangerous. And yet these people who chose to leave what they knew in their homes, to come to a land that had a promise of a new life, a new start. But the biggest thing they were looking for was freedom. And here's the thing that people need to understand: as these people first came across and settled these colonies, were still under British rule. And I think that somehow we forget that. Somehow we forget that these colonists were in fact, people that committed crimes over here were actually sent back to Britain to face the judge, if you will, for their crimes. And there were people that were sent back there who had committed supposed crimes that hadn't actually committed a crime at all. And that was part of when our documents were written. Things were added into our documents like due process, because due process was not being instituted under British rule. And so we have these people who were coming to this land, seeking freedom of religion, freedom of having to be under the thumb of a tyrannical government, freedom of speech, freedom of choice. They were looking for a place of where they could live their lives without fearing their government. That was their hope. That was their intent. And this went on for several hundred years, guys. I don't think we realize how long the colonists and how the generations endured this tyrannical government known as England. And we even see that in the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, where the framers wrote that people will deal with abuses for a long period of time before actually doing something about that, and it was a long length of time that they waited, like I say, several hundred years, and when we think about this, aren't we in within that 200-year time frame of where we are today, and our own government, which has become just as tyrannical as that of England. And I fail to see much of a difference between the laws and codes and statutes and regulations that England placed upon its own people, including the settlers of the colonies, and what our own government is imposing on us. And it's extremely interesting that we would not see this, first of all, for what it is. We should see this for exactly what it is, and exactly how the founding fathers of our current documents saw this. They saw the tyranny. They saw the fact that people's rights were being violated. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I have to question today whether we're really seeing those rights in our lives, and actually able to exercise those rights. Listen, when you have to pay for a right, it is no longer a right; it becomes a privilege, and this is extremely dangerous on our behalf, because it's the frog in the pot syndrome. And for people that don't understand that, if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and put it on a low heat and just let it sit there, eventually that frog will cook in that water, not understanding that it's actually being cooked, because the water gradually warms up and the frog dies. And we're in kind of that same situation, where we're the frog in the pot, and they just have us on a low simmer, and what that means is they're taking away our rights slowly but surely, a little bit at a time. And so the point of all of this is this, and I may have to do this in 2 videos. As time went on, the settlers of this nation, who realized that things were not really changing, because they were under the same laws that they were under in England, had to pay the same taxes, had to follow the same rules. There really was not the freedom that they were searching for. And so as time went on, these men and women began to prepare themselves to defend against this tyrannical government, knowing that when they declared their independence, that when they declared their freedom, that war was going to ensue. They knew that. And if you read throughout history, and I thought about just making this and going through all the documents and everything, but you know what? I'm tired of doing everybody's homework for them. With Google search and everything else that we have on the internet, if you really want to know the truth about our history, then read it for yourself. Grow up and search these things out for yourself and use some personal responsibility. But I can tell you this, for years and years and years prior to the war between us and England, there was a massive amount of prepping that was going on. People were hiding weapons and powder and lead, and they were gathering food, and they were making fortresses, and they were making plans among themselves. They were putting together their entire plan of defense against a government that was going to come over here and try to force the colonists to stay under that thumb. And what is this all about? Well, two things, if I can break it down real simple: power and money. And yes, the two go hand in hand. But that's really what it boiled down to, was power and money. England wanted all the power, and they wanted all the money over the colonists. And so as time went on, and of course we all know that England had sent troops over here to try to maintain what they would consider law and order under English rule, which the colonists felt as oppression. Because it was all about, listen, nothing had changed. Nothing had changed at all. And I know I keep repeating that, but I think it's important that we realize that just because people had come to a new nation did not give them the freedom that they were desiring in this new nation. And I'm going to stop this here and do a second video.